It was a quiet afternoon when Greg Matthews received the call. He had just finished his lunch and was reviewing a few reports when his phone buzzed. It was from Marcus Davis, his boss at Goldstone Enterprises. Greg, a 39-year-old senior project manager, had been with the company for over a decade, watching it grow from a small startup into the powerful tech giant it was now. He had helped build Goldstone, piece by piece, long hours, countless sacrifices, and a loyalty that made him one of the most valuable people in the organization. But this call wasn't the usual weekly check-in. "Greg, can you come to my office?" Now. Marcus's voice was tense, not like the friendly banter they usually shared. It was sharp, businesslike, and cold. Greg's stomach twisted as he gathered his things. A feeling of dread washed over him, but he shrugged it off. "It's probably just a project update," he muttered to himself, though he didn't believe his own words. The office felt different as he walked to Marcus's door. There was a subtle shift in the air, a palpable sense of something wrong. As Greg stepped inside, he was greeted not by Marcus's usual warm smile, but by his serious expression and an empty chair facing his desk. "Sit down, Greg," Marcus said, motioning toward the chair. "Everything okay, Marcus?" Greg asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he took his seat. Marcus paused, as if choosing his words carefully. Then, without hesitation, he said, "Greg, after much deliberation, we've decided to move in a different direction. Unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go." The words hit Greg like a punch to the gut. He froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard right. "Let me go? What do you mean? I've been with this company for over 10 years. I've put everything into this." Marcus's eyes briefly flickered with something that could almost be described as guilt. "I know, Greg. I know how hard you've worked. You've been a huge asset to Goldstone. But the company's changing, and unfortunately, we can't continue paying someone with your salary. You're just too expensive for the direction we're going. We're downsizing, restructuring. It's not personal." Greg's heart raced, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The idea that his years of dedication, his late nights, his loyalty could be reduced to the fact that he was too expensive was too much to process. "You're firing me over money?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly despite his best effort to hold it together. "I don't want to make it sound harsh, but yes, this is a tough decision for the company," Marcus replied, avoiding Greg's gaze. Greg stood up, anger beginning to bubble up inside of him. "You're telling me that after everything I've done for Goldstone, after helping this company become what it is today, you're just going to toss me aside like I'm nothing? For a paycheck?" Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples as if he were the one burdened by the decision. "Greg, I know it's hard to hear, but I have no choice. This is the direction we have to go in. I'm sorry, truly." Greg couldn't believe it. He stood there, stunned, unsure of how to respond. He had given years of his life to this company, sacrificed time with his family, his personal life, all for Goldstone. And now it was over. Just like that. "I'm sorry, Greg," Marcus repeated, his voice barely audible now. "You'll receive a severance package and a few months of health benefits to help with the transition." Greg stared at Marcus for a long moment. The words were sinking in, but the sting of betrayal burned deep. He couldn't understand how it had come to this. "You're not even offering me a chance to prove my worth? To stay on and adjust my salary? Nothing?" Marcus shook his head. "We've made our decision. It's final." Greg stood there, his mind racing. This wasn't the way things were supposed to go. He had given everything to this company, and now they were telling him he wasn't worth the investment? He turned away from Marcus and walked out of the office, his mind clouded with confusion and anger. As he walked down the hall, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. What now? What was he supposed to do after being let go from the only place he had known for so long? But in the midst of the anger, something stirred inside of him. A spark of realization. This could be the turning point. He wasn't done yet. He wasn't going to let this define him. The thought lingered in his mind. They made a mistake. Greg Matthews had been discarded by Goldstone. But that wasn't the end of his story. It was only the beginning. Greg sat in his car, parked just outside the Goldstone Enterprises building. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He had to stop himself from punching the dashboard. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. It was hard to believe what had just happened. Too expensive. Those words echoed in his mind. They felt like a slap in the face. After all the years he had spent with Goldstone, all the long nights working late, pushing the company forward, this was the thanks he got? A severance package and a cold handshake. But deep down, he knew he couldn't stay angry forever. He needed to move forward. Greg stared out the window at the bustling city around him, the place he had once felt like an integral part of. He had built his career here, worked tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder. But now, it felt like everything had been taken from him. His career, his stability, his identity. He let out a deep breath and wiped his face with his hands. Enough. He was done feeling sorry for himself. It was time to take control. Greg thought about his next move. He could stay in this rut, sending out resumes to companies that might offer him another job. But that would mean starting over. Again. And he wasn't ready to do that. No, there had to be something more. Something better. He grabbed his phone and typed out a message to his old college friend, Chris Montgomery. Chris had been a tech startup founder for years, and Greg had always admired the way he ran his company. The man was sharp, innovative, and most importantly, successful. They had stayed in touch over the years, but Greg hadn't really considered working with him until now. Hey Chris, long time no talk. Things have been crazy. I'm free to chat if you have time. Need some advice. Greg hesitated for a moment, but hit send. If there was one person who could help him figure out his next step, it was Chris. Maybe it was time for Greg to step outside the corporate world and build something for himself. A few minutes later, Greg's phone buzzed. Hey man, let's catch up. How about a coffee tomorrow? Greg smiled, a small sense of relief washing over him. Maybe this was the break he needed. The next day, they met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. The familiar hum of conversations around them did little to calm Greg's nerves. But seeing Chris, the same easygoing guy with a sharp business mind, instantly put him at ease. So, what's up? Chris asked as he took a sip of his black coffee. Greg leaned back in his chair, a deep sigh escaping his lips. I got fired, Chris. Chris raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. He waited for Greg to continue. I've been with Goldstone for over 10 years. Built my career there, gave everything I had, and now they let me go. Chris frowned. That's tough, man. But hey, I don't mean to sound cold, but it sounds like an opportunity. Greg looked at Chris, confused. An opportunity? Yeah, think about it, Greg. You've been in the corporate world, doing what they wanted you to do. You've got the experience. You know how things work. Now it's your turn to take all that knowledge and build something for yourself. Greg stared at his friend. Build something for myself? Like a startup? Exactly. Chris grinned. You know what they say, you can either work for someone else, or you can build your own empire. But if you're really serious about it, you've got to stop thinking small. You can't just do a side project and hope it works. You need to dive in, full force. Greg rubbed his temples. But it's not that simple, Chris. I don't have the money to start something from scratch. I've been living paycheck to paycheck for the last few years, just trying to keep up with my bills. Chris smiled. I get it. I really do. But remember, I started from zero, and so did a lot of others. It's not about the money. It's about using what you've got, the skills, the network, the drive. That's what matters. Greg sat there considering Chris's words. Could he do it? Could he really leave everything behind and start fresh? Was he ready to put everything on the line for the chance to create something bigger than himself? Maybe this is my shot, Greg thought. Maybe this is the moment that changes everything. Greg couldn't stop thinking about Chris's words as he left the coffee shop. The more he replayed the conversation in his head, the more he felt a surge of excitement. A startup. It was risky, yes, but it was exactly what he needed. The freedom. The chance to build something of his own. But there was one problem. Where do I even begin? Back in his small apartment, Greg sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He had a vague idea of what he wanted to do, but turning that into a reality seemed like a monumental task. He had a background in project management, and with Goldstone, he had led massive tech implementations. But now he needed to do more than manage projects. He needed to think bigger, like a CEO, like an innovator. His mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, But one idea stuck out more than the rest: a tech consulting firm. The world was full of companies that needed help with their digital transformation, and Greg had the perfect skills to guide them through it. It was a niche, but it was growing rapidly. He spent the next few days working non-stop. Greg developed a business plan, outlined the services he could offer, and started building a website. It was overwhelming, but it felt like a new chapter was unfolding. As he was about to step away from his computer for a break, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, a former colleague from Goldstone. They had worked together closely during his time there, and despite their professional relationship, there had always been an undeniable tension between them. Something unspoken, a connection that had simmered beneath the surface. "Hey Greg, I heard what happened. I'm really sorry. I know it must be tough, but if you ever need to talk or get away for a bit, I'm here. You've got my number." Greg felt a strange mix of emotions. He hadn't expected to hear from her, but he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Why now? After everything, after the way the company had treated him, was she just being kind? Or was it something more? He debated for a moment, but eventually replied, "Thanks, Maya. It's been a rough few days. Maybe we can grab a coffee sometime?" Almost immediately, she responded, "I'd like that." A few days later, they met at a quiet cafe on the corner of a street in downtown. Maya was sitting by the window when Greg arrived, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face looking a bit more tired than the last time he had seen her. She was, as always, sharp and confident, but there was something different about her today. "Greg, it's good to see you," Maya said with a soft smile. She motioned for him to sit across from her. "Yeah, same here," he replied, settling into the chair. They exchanged the usual pleasantries before Maya got to the point. "I heard what happened with Goldstone," she began, her voice gentle but direct. "And honestly, I don't get it. You were their best project manager. You were indispensable. It's insane that they let you go." Greg shrugged, trying to maintain his composure. "It's business, Maya. They needed to save money. I was a casualty of that." Maya's eyes softened. "Still, it doesn't make sense. You were more than just an employee to them. They should have seen what they had in you." Greg leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. The conversation was taking an unexpected turn, but he wasn't ready to dive into his feelings just yet. "Well, it doesn't matter now. I'm moving forward. I'm actually thinking of starting my own business." Maya raised her eyebrows, clearly intrigued. "A business? That's huge. What kind of business?" "A tech consulting firm," Greg replied, his voice gaining confidence. "I have the experience, the skills, and the connections. I just need to take the leap." Maya smiled, her expression supportive, but laced with a hint of curiosity. "I think you're going to do great, Greg. You've always been good at this. You've got a mind for strategy and problem solving." There was a brief silence, and then Maya hesitated before speaking again. "I know we never really talked about us before, but I've always admired you, more than just professionally." Greg's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected that. He looked at her, trying to gauge whether she was serious. Had all those late-night meetings, those quiet conversations in the office, meant something more to her too? Before he could say anything, Maya quickly added, "I'm not saying we should get into anything, Greg. But if you need someone to talk to about anything, really, I'm here. I always have been." Greg felt a tug inside him, a pull toward something he had buried deep down. Maya wasn't just a former colleague. There was a connection between them, something that had always been left unsaid. She was the one person who truly understood the pressure he had been under, the sacrifices he had made. But this was complicated. He had just been fired, and now she was offering support in a way he didn't know how to handle. Was this just friendly? Or was there something more beneath the surface? He didn't know the answer, but he felt the uncertainty creeping into his mind. He needed to focus on building his career, but what if he couldn't ignore the pull toward Maya? Over the next few weeks, Greg threw himself into building his tech consulting business. He worked long hours developing his website, making phone calls, and reaching out to potential clients. The world was full of opportunities, and for the first time in years, he felt in control of his own destiny. No more office politics. No more corporate games. This was his time. But even with the rush of excitement and the adrenaline of his new venture, something felt like it was missing. Greg's thoughts kept drifting back to Maya. He had been trying to keep his distance, to focus on his career. But their coffee date had left a lingering impression. Maya had always been more than a colleague. There had been a spark between them, something that had been left unsaid for far too long. The way she looked at him, the way she supported him. She was someone who truly understood the man he had become and the pressure he had been under at Goldstone. And yet, Greg couldn't bring himself to fully open up. He was too focused on his business, too afraid of letting anything or anyone derail his plans. There was too much at stake now. But Maya hadn't given up. One evening, after finishing up some paperwork for a potential client, Greg's phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. "Hey, I know you're busy, but I've been thinking. There's an opportunity I want to discuss with you. Can we meet up again?" Greg paused, staring at the message. He could feel his heart race, and part of him wanted to say no. He didn't need distractions right now. But then, another part of him couldn't ignore the curiosity that tugged at him. What was Maya up to? He replied, "Sure, I'm free tomorrow. Coffee again?" The next afternoon, Greg met Maya at the same cafe. She was already sitting at their usual table when he arrived, her eyes focused on her laptop. She looked up and smiled when he sat down. "Thanks for meeting me again, Greg. I know things have been crazy for you lately. I won't take up too much of your time." Greg sat down, his usual warm smile still holding a hint of hesitation. "What's this about, Maya?" Maya closed her laptop and leaned in, lowering her voice slightly. "Well, I've been hearing a lot of buzz around a project at Goldstone. Something big is coming up, and the company is looking for someone to lead it. The thing is, it's a huge challenge. A challenge that I think you could absolutely crush. But there's a catch. They need someone with your exact experience, someone who's been through the fire. They need you." Greg's stomach dropped. "Goldstone? After everything that happened?" Maya nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes, but here's the thing. The person they're really looking for, someone who can pull this project off, is you. The problem is, the execs have no idea what you've been doing since you left. They think you've moved on completely. I think you could walk right in and take over, Greg, but they don't know you've been working on something new." Greg leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words settling in. This was exactly what he'd been avoiding, the chance to return to the very company that had tossed him aside. "You want me to go back, don't you?" Greg asked, his voice low. Maya hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm not asking you to go back, Greg. I'm just telling you that you have the power to make them come to you. You don't need them, but you could be the one to fix what they've broken. If you want to prove yourself, prove that they were wrong to let you go, this is your shot." Greg felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment. He could walk away, continue building his own empire, or he could take the risk, put himself back in the game, and force the hand of the company that had wronged him. But what did he really want? Was he ready to let the bitterness of the past go? Could he really walk back into Goldstone and use it to his advantage? "I don't know if I want to go back, Maya," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll tell you what, if they want me, they're going to have to work for it. I'll make them regret what they did to me, but I'm not doing it just for revenge. This time, it's on my terms." Maya smiled, her eyes lighting up with understanding. Exactly. Greg could feel the familiar weight of ambition settling on his shoulders once more. The challenge was too tempting to pass up. He wasn't just going to take Goldstone back, he was going to dominate them. But first, he needed to play the game smart. Greg's decision was made. He was going to do it. He was going to walk back into Goldstone and take control of what was rightfully his. But this time, he was going to do things on his terms. He wasn't just going to fix their problems. He was going to prove to them that they had made a huge mistake letting him go. He spent the next few days preparing, refining his business plan, setting up meetings with potential partners, and researching the issues Goldstone was facing. He was going to walk in with more than just an offer of help. He was going to offer them a solution they couldn't refuse. But there was one last thing he needed: leverage. And that's where Maya came in. Greg met with Maya a couple of days later at a small bistro near his apartment. She was sitting at the corner table, looking as poised as always. When he sat down across from her, she didn't waste time. "So, you're really doing it, huh?" Maya asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Greg nodded. "Yeah, I'm in. But I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for me. I'll make them realize they need me more than they think." Maya smiled, a knowing look crossing her face. "I thought that's what you'd say. So what's your play?" Greg leaned in, lowering his voice. "I'm not just walking in there like some desperate former employee looking for a second chance. I'm coming in with a strategy. I've already lined up potential clients for my new tech firm, and if they want me, they're going to have to offer me something better than just a paycheck. I'm going to ask for more control over projects and decisions. I'll set the terms." Maya nodded in approval. "Good. You've got the right mindset now. But remember, if you're going to take them down, you have to be smart. They'll try to play you. You need to make sure you have everything lined up: contracts, proposals, and most importantly, your own worth." Greg looked her in the eye, the weight of her words sinking in. "I know. And I'm going to make sure they understand that they let the wrong person go." A few days later, Greg was in the Goldstone boardroom, sitting across from Mark West and the other executives. He had prepared for this moment, every word, every gesture. When Mark looked at him with that usual smug expression, Greg felt a surge of power. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming his place in a world he had built, brick by brick. "Greg, we appreciate you coming back," Mark said, a hint of awkwardness in his voice. "We know things didn't work out before, but, well, we've got a project that we think you're perfect for." Greg smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm here for more than just a project, Mark. I'm here to help you fix the problems you've created. But I'm not just going to do it on your terms. I'm doing it my way." Mark's eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Greg leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I want full control over the digital transformation strategy. I want to oversee all major projects. And most importantly, I want equity in the company. If I'm going to help you save this place, you'll have to give me something more than just a salary." Mark blinked, his face faltering. "You're asking for a lot, Greg." "I'm not asking," Greg interrupted, his voice unwavering. "I'm telling you what I need if you want me back." There was a long silence in the room as Mark and the others exchanged glances. Greg could see the hesitation in their eyes. They had no choice. They knew that without him, the company would continue to flounder. Finally, Mark sighed. "All right, we'll give you what you want. Let's get this project rolling." Greg didn't show a hint of satisfaction, but inside, a fire burned brighter than ever. He had won. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated or overlooked. In the weeks that followed, Greg dove into his new role with a fervor he hadn't felt in years. He took control of the digital transformation initiatives, implemented changes that Goldstone's competitors had been using for years, and quickly proved his worth. The company, once on the brink of collapse, was now flourishing. But the real victory came when Greg finally walked into Mark's office, a few months after his return. Mark looked up from his desk, surprised to see Greg standing there with a calm smile. "Everything's on track, Mark," Greg said. "The changes we've made have made a huge difference. And I've got more projects lined up that will push us even further." Mark nodded, clearly impressed. "I'll admit, Greg, I didn't think it would work. But you've delivered. I'm glad we made the decision to bring you back." Greg stood tall, the weight of his success settling over him like a heavy cloak. "You didn't make the decision, Mark. I did." Greg had done it. He had not only reclaimed his career, but had made a statement, one that echoed far beyond the walls of Goldstone. With his power, wisdom, and relentless drive, he turned the company around, showing everyone, including Mark, that underestimating him was the biggest mistake they could have made. But this wasn't the end for Greg. His journey, filled with new challenges and victories, had only just begun. And as for the world he had once known, it was waiting for him to take the next step, conquer the next obstacle, and prove once again that no one could stop him when he set his mind to something. But that's a story for another time. Until next time, where the road ahead promises to be just as wild. Stay tuned for the next adventure, because this is far from over. See you in the next story.